Before I turn the floor over to the general for about 40 minutes, let me explain our format for tonight's event. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so if you have a question you'd like to ask, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to those at the end. General, it's a real privilege to have you share your experiences in Vietnam tonight as the Foundation focuses on the war this year as it marks the 50th anniversary of our participation there. General Stovall, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you to the Air Force Historical Foundation for allowing me to be part of this year. First of all, what I'd like to say is that, as a Jolly Green pilot, I was part of a combat team. I had 5 men in my helicopter, the HH-53 helicopter. We had the co-pilot, the pilot, an enlisted flight engineer who operated the hoist and manned the gun on the crew entrance door. We had 2 men on board, one of them on the aft ramp and one of them on the left window. Many times, we also had combat photographers on board. They were to take pictures of all people on the hoist or something else. When we were under fire, they hardly ever did anything but have an M16 sitting next to the hoist operator and giving them cover fire. In fact, one of them won 2 silver stars for doing that. Let me go on and talk a little bit about, I started out as a 141 pilot, and then I got, after a year and a half, they told us we're going to Vietnam and us to go in helicopters. Okay, well, let me go on here. Anyway, I started out as 141, didn't want to be a helicopter pilot, went through helicopter school, came out as an H-3 pilot. They sent me to Patrick Air Force Base to get a year of backgrounds in the helicopters. About 4 months after that, they delivered the HH-53s. So I transitioned to the HH-53. And at the end of that year, I was on my way to Vietnam as an aircraft commander in the H-53. I talked a little bit about the crew. We had on board, we had 3 miniguns. These are 6-barrel guns that spin at high rates. They have 2 triggers. One of them fires at 2,000 rounds a minute, and the other fires at 4,000 rounds a minute. We had a lot of armor underneath the aircraft to protect us, particularly in the cockpit, under the engine, and critical components. We had 2 450-gallon drop tanks that we could carry fuel in, and we had air refueling. So I flew missions as long as 9 hours airborne with air refueling. I'm going to start out with early on. One of the first SARs that I got involved with, I just finished my aircraft commander check ride at a Ford operating base. And I was on the way back to NKP, Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. That was our base. And we got a call that there was an aircraft down. And all of a sudden, we decided we're going to try to go for the SAR and beat the guys out of NKP. My Czech airman who was on board, the flight examiner, was a friend of mine I flew 141s with. And so we're going in there, and I'm sitting in the aircraft commander seat, and he says, no, you're now the co-pilot. And we were after an OV-10 Covey 219. Malin Long was the pilot, and he'd been hit, and he was trying to get out of Laos when he went down right on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was hazy that day, and we had 2 helicopters. As we were going in, the anti-aircraft fire was firing at us, and it was coming between me and my wingman, and he broke off. We didn't see it. It was so hazy. We got into a hover. I was on the aircraft. I could see the hoist and everything on the ground that was going on. Paul, the aircraft commander, was hovering, and we got him up pretty fast. But one of the things that happened, F-104s were coming in and strafing with 20 millimeter, and it was bouncing off a cliff in front of us, and the 20 millimeter shells are coming right over the top of the helicopter, and we were afraid that they were going to hit us. We finally got out of there. We turned to come down. We did not know where we were. We flew parallel to the road, and about 400 feet, we had a 23 millimeter come open up on us. He was about 20 feet in front of the rotor blades. Paul broke it off, dove to the ground. The A1s killed it. We get going again. We get about 1,200 feet, and another 23 millimeter comes up. We do another dive to the ground, and the A1s killed that. And they shot at us until we got into clouds about 11,000 feet. When I got back that day, I was wondering why we got shot at, because we didn't know where the guns were. I went into intel and I spent about every other day for 2 weeks memorizing all the guns in Laos. So I never got shot at again, not knowing that the guns were there. So that was my first SAR. And after I got done, the sense of accomplishment was nearly overwhelming, because I realized we had a lifelong impact on that person and his family. And the motivation to do this again was nearly narcotic. My next SAR that I flew on, we had 7 ops officers in our ops office, and I was number 7. My job was to get the stars and stripes every day so people would read it. And at midnight, I'd go in and get the frag order that if we had something going on the next day. So I'm in there at midnight, and we hear that an AC-130 gunship had been shot down. Now, what I will tell you, 2 days before this, another AC-130 gunship got shot down by an SA-2, and all 14 people on board were killed. Also, my roommate, David Pannebecker, who was a close friend of mine from Patrick Air Force Base, he went down and we lost his crew. So we lost a helicopter and an A-1. That day, we got this call. I went back to the ops and I said, okay, I'm going to set up the crews for the next day. Well, I wasn't on alert, but I put myself on the next bird after the alert bird, my next 2 ship. So I would be in line to go out to make a pickup. And I even signed the form as assistant operations clerk, although our officer, though I was Ops 7. So the next day when they woke us up, nobody knew any difference. I got my aircraft and we went out there. And so I got a call in. There was an 01 Raven pilot, and these guys are spread out in the field. I didn't know how many were there. There were 15 total. 2 of them were on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We had a heck of a fight getting those guys out. Air America picked them up. 3 more were in another position. We had helicopters there. There were 10 guys where I was going, but I didn't know it. So now I am really pumped up. The red line, the helicopter is 170. I was going 180 knots, as low as I could go, which was stupid. The next thing I know, the guy says, 12 o'clock, Jolly, 12 o'clock. Well, I thought it was ground fire. I went through the red smoke at about 175 miles an hour, made a turnaround, came into the hover. I'm sitting in a hover, and the nose is moving rapidly back and forth. And this flight engineer says, Captain, if you take your feet off the rudder pedals, the nose will hold still. That's how nervous I was. So we picked up the first guy. I says, I have my pickup. I'm leaving. I go to the next guy at about.
You're Stovall. You're busy though.
And
it's not oyster anyway, honey.
The
Not
01
now
pilot.
yet.
So the 01 pilot says, Jolly, they're not that far apart. You can hover in between them. So now I'm going from one to the other, picking them up. We had to put the hoist down. One guy had a broken leg, and the PJ went down, who happened to be Chuck McGrath. Now, you'll hear his name 2 more times in here, because he was the one that I rescued out of North Vietnam. So I got 8 guys on board, and I'm feeling pretty full of myself. And we get a call from the King. Now, one of our key parts in our combat rescue team, made up of the A1, the H-53s, and the Kingbird, the HC-130s that refueled us, coordinated, acted almost like a command and control force. Asked me how many people I had on board, and I said, I made the wrong statement. I should have said, you're garbled. I can't hear you, and picked up the other two. And I said, 8. They said, say again, 8. They said, get out of there. So then I came back with 8 of them. So that kind of got me through my rookie part of my combat rescue. The next big SAR that I got in, we're going to talk about this, was Oyster 01 Bravo. On the May 10th, 1972, they had a mid-cap team made up, and the lead was Oyster 01. Hold on. Bob, let me look up.
Bob Lodge.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Anyway, so Bob was the lead, and Roger Locker was the backseater. They just shot down their 3rd MiG. They were the leading MiG killers at that time. That formation shot down 3 MiGs that day. They were working on their 4th MiG when they got caught from underneath and shot down. They were upside down in a spin and fire, and Roger Locker bailed out. Bob's Lodge rode it in. And so Ron is on the ground. It's the 10th of May. Fast forward to the 1st of June. So now we would go to an orbit in northern Laos and hold there, because the Air Force bombed at 9:30. The Navy bombed at 1:30. The Vietnamese did training mission. They did training missions in between to practice for us coming. And so all the aircraft were coming out of North Vietnam at that time. They're strike missions. And one guy comes out and said, hey, I just got a call from an Oyster 01 Bravo, said he went down the 10th of May and he's okay. Now, he has been on the ground 22 days in North Vietnam evading. My first thought was, it's a trap. So Ron Smith, my hero, says, hey, we're going to go have a look. And so I said, well, okay, we'll follow you up. So we get up there. We've got to go between the Black River. There's a mountain ridge about 9,000 feet high. We had climbed over that, went through a pass about 7,000, came down the other side. Ron was already out there. He's in the middle of the Red River Valley. There are 57s and 37s fired at him. I can't see him very well because it's hazy, but there's a black cloud in the air for all the explosions from the 57, 37 millimeter. We hadn't been there too long, and I kind of came up out of this, up behind this ridge where we were. There's a couple of villages down there, and I looked down the valley, and I see an SA-2 surface air missile coming up the valley. It was probably 4 or 5 miles away, and I see it explode. What I didn't know at that time, they have a 1-minute timer in them, and if they don't, after 1 minute, they self-detonate, or if they don't get lock on the target. So one or the other happened, because Ron was pretty low and they might have got into the ground clutter. So that really got my attention. So a few minutes later, actually it's probably more than that, Sandy 2 is there, and he yells to us, Jolly, MiG, MiG. So now we'll fast go back to helicopter school, and I watch a movie where the Sikorsky test pilots had barrel rolled and looped an H-53 from 1,500 feet above the ground. So I thought about that. And so later on, when we were there, a guy named Ken Erdis, who was a great rescue pilot, had dodged a SA-2 by rolling into about 130 or 40 degrees of bank and spiraling down. So I practiced that several times, and Chuck McGrath said, you know, when you did that, you kept positive G's on the aircraft so we wouldn't go hit the ceiling. But since you were such a big angle, we were afraid of falling sideways, so we all had to have our hands on the ceiling. So I felt pretty comfortable about flying the helicopter nearly upside down. So now here I am. I get the MiG call. I had a map in my hands trying to figure out where in the hell we were. I get the MiG call. I throw the map aside. I grab the controls. I said, I've got it. and I rolled the helicopter upside down. Now we have windows in the top of the H-53. I looked down through them, and I could see we're about 750 feet. That second, my mind went into hyperdrive. It's a real phenomenon for somebody that's in great danger. It was completely silent. I felt I had a minute to do what I had to do in about 10 or 12 seconds. And I looked up through the top of the helicopter, and I could see the rotor blades going around. They turn at 316 RPM, and I could see them go by at slow motion and see curves in them. So I know we were stressing out the rotor head. Now I rolled that helicopter out as smooth as I could, and we're hopping sideways about 10 foot, about 4 10-foot hops at about 50 knots, going 40, 50 knots going sideways. We took all that energy to the side. And about that time, I look out and I see through the window a MiG-21 going by about 500 yards. And my mind snapped back, and now back on real time. And of course, the two helicopters, we sounded like the 5th grade boys choir. Our voices were so high. We finally got back together. We'd been there a little while, and the two F4s had refueled, and they came back up to give us MiG cover. About that, I see an SA-2 go up, and I see him hit one of the F4s. They came out of the hit in a nose-up attitude. I get on the radio and I says, F4 hit by Sam. This is Jolly 57, turn 170. I'll tell you when to punch out. He flew over the top of me, and I said, you can punch out now. And he says, I still have control. I still got good engine. He made it back to Thailand and did a controlled bailout there. So now we don't have any MiG cap again. What we didn't know, or at least I didn't know, we were 6 miles from Yen Bai MiG field, which had 73 MiG 21s, 19s, and 17s on it. And we were, at that time, you could not bomb the MiG fields or the runways. Long story about that. So anyway, about that time, we're out there, and Ron went over because Roger was talking about a lake. And there was a lake on the south side of the Red River, but he was on the north side, and it was a reservoir we didn't have in our maps. Finally, Ron gets over there. He's getting shot at by the guns protecting this dam. And Roger gives him a call and gives him, I think, a directions and bearing from where he was. About that time, a second MiG comes. Now, Ron thinks they may read this in the traffic pattern trying to land at the base. But, whatever it was, they didn't shoot at us. About that time, we had another problem. We were bingo fuel. The A1s did not have enough fuel to cover us on the way out. So they left. I climb over the mountain ridge, and my wingman calls me and he says, I've got a low-level light in one engine, which means we get about 10 minutes of fuel. We're about 100 miles inside of North Vietnam at that time. And so I call the HC-130 Kingbird, and I says, King, this is Jolly 57 flight. I'm not sure we're going to get out of North Vietnam. You may have to set on the ground. He says, Jolly, I've been monitoring your fuel. I'm at 10,000 feet, 50 miles in North Vietnam. Why don't you come up and get some gas? So we go up there, and you can imagine if you're at 10,000 feet, we're refueling at 110 knots in North Vietnam. If the MiGs come, the Sandy's dead, or the HC-130's dead. Meanwhile, they had sent 2 Marine F4s where we had a base in Thailand up to give us MiG cap. Well, they're gray. The North Vietnamese aircraft are blue or silver. So when my wingman called Bandit at 10 o'clock high, we thought they were MiGs. So the helicopters we drop off, elevator down, and the HC-130 is trying to get his hose in, 81-foot hoses, and at 110 knots, we thought he was a goner. Of course, it was the Marines. So we get back to NKP that night, and we get Ron and I get a call from General Vaught. And so he asked us about going back up there. We kind of said, yes, but. He said, can you get him? We said, yes, but. we've got the MiG field there, and we know they've got SA2s. So he said, we're going to take care of those. Basically, what we did the next day, we stopped almost the whole air war there to get Roger out. In the Air Force flag order, there was 119 aircraft. And somebody told me they would have had more, but they could only get 21 KC-135s to refuel the tankers. Give us MiG-cap. They only had 20 minutes on station time in North Vietnam, the F-4s. So we had to have 2 sets of 4 in North Vietnam with us. Another set, 8 more en route, and then 8 more on the tanker. So we get into the valley there, and Ron's out ahead of us. He flies over the check if they'd cratered the runway at the base, which they did. And you can imagine the anti-aircraft fire that he took. He's out there again today. He should have been shot down. If he'd have been shot down, that'd have been the end of the SAR. But you cannot face anything like that. It was just unbelievable. So he comes back. He says, "Jollies, we can't go across. It's just too dangerous. So we're going to go around." So we started around. We went by the MiG field. I could see the MiG field when I went by. Up the Red River, and then we crossed with the place they call it the FO-105 crossing point, the thumb in the river. We got across there okay, and went up on top, and Ron calls me. He says, "Hey, we don't have any MiG-cap. What do you want to do?" And I said, "I sure as hell don't want to come back tomorrow." So we went in, and we got Ron out pretty quickly. Roger, we got him up pretty quickly. He was a motivated survivor. And we came out of there, and now we're coming back. We fly about 200 feet when we're up in North Vietnam because of the SAMs and the MiGs. And we had 4 A1s with us. Now we come over the hump to go down across the Red River Valley there, and there's a train sitting there. It's a steam engine with cars on it, and I think they had 2 sandbag gun cars on it. Now we go over the top of it at about 300 feet. They're all cranking their guns to try to get on us. My mini gunners are trying to shoot it. I'm jinking like crazy, and nobody shoots anybody. But Sandy 3 and 4 stay behind and start attack this gun. My PJ said, it's like a World War II movie. You got 2 prop airplanes out there attacking this train. They blew up the engine. The gun cars are all on fire, and now they're behind us. So now we're almost across. We think we're home free, and my wingman, who was Jerry Shipman, my roommate, looks out and he says, "Bandit, 9 o'clock low." And all of a sudden we look, and here's this MiG-17 coming at us. So when the night before dinner, we're sitting at the table, and Lieutenant Colonel, Latham, who was Sandy 4, who had been an F-106 pilot, he was put on there because he had some air-to-air training. And he told us the night before, he said, "Jollies, here's how it's going to work. If we get jumped by a MiG, I want you to turn straight into him and go straight at him. I want you to jink. As soon as his wings quit moving, you jink back the other way. I'm going to tell you to push over. You push over as hard as you can and dive towards the ground. We're going to shoot him in the face, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to ram the SOB." We said, "Well, that sounds good." So they were back there. Now, here's what happened. Of course, this MiG is trying to turn on us, and he's got his belly up to us. And number 3 in the formation is Major, then now retired Colonel Jim Harding, one of my all-time heroes. And he opens up with these 4 20-millimeter cannons. He had a 7.62 pot on him, and these Willie Pete rockets, but he led him too far. And the MiG broke off, did a chandelle, and left. So now we all get back out here. Now, Jim Harding, now think about this. If you want to have somebody on your team protecting you, Jim Harding, Air Force Cross, 3 Silver Stars, 14 DFCs, about 40 air medals, 4 Purple Hearts, shot down twice, once in an Army helicopter, the second time by a surface air handheld surface air missile, and he was on the ground and killed 3 guys before we got him out. He was on our team, and he was the commander of the A1 squadron. We get back. Now we're on the way back, and they said, Jollies and Sandies all go back to NKP Jolly 30. That was my call sign. You go on to Udorn. We said, you gotta be kidding us. My roommate, that Jerry Shipman, who made the only night recovery of the entire war, he calls, he said, I've got an oil problem in one of my engines. I think I'm going to have to shut down my engine. I said, well, we need to escort him back. So we all go back to Urdorn. The commander of 7th Air Force, General Vaught, was there to meet the aircraft. So we all get out. And of course, Roger gets in the ambulance, and this girlfriend he had, we knew it was serious then because Patty got in the ambulance with him, and they later got married. So we go to the bar, and we're pounding down beers. And a little while later, a colonel walks in. He says, are there any Jollies or Sandies in here? And we raised our hand. They said, that'd be us. He's getting your aircraft and go to NKP. We said, we've all been drinking. They says, we don't care. Well, the Sandies get back ahead of us, and they beat the field up really bad. And the helicopters, we can't do that. We just have a red smoke coming out the back, the aft ramp. I'm turning final, and the sun is shining, so I see my shadow on the ground, and I realize I don't have my gear down. I damn near landed gear up. So that was the Oyster 01 mission, which, you know, there was a lot of notoriety behind that. My second mission in North Vietnam was Valiant 03 Alpha. That day we had 4 F4 shot down. And 2 of them were guys who were supposed to be the MiG cap, and they got jumped simultaneously, and both of them got shot down. The 4 guys bailed out. The 2 backseaters got captured right away. And I gotta look at a name here. Hold on. I'll think of his name in a minute. No, okay, I'll think of it in a minute. Ben Arell. Anyway, Ben Arell, who was one of the he and Jerry Shipman, I thought, were the 2 best helicopter pilots there. They were up there in that holding. They got one of the pilots out. The other pilot, Len Eichmann, bailed out over 500 knots in the negative G bailout, which means he was floating in the seat when he pulled the ejection handle. When he went out, he had a broken arm, a dislocated shoulder, a broken jaw because his helmet came off, a broken leg, and a 90-degree dislocation of his leg. He was unconscious. He came down in a tree, and the other SAR was over, and everybody had left. And the only thing was there was a fast FAC. One of the things that was crucial to the rescues were the forward air controllers, the FACs. In Laos, they were always there. They were calling in the fighters to clear the area, shoot the heavy artillery, and give us cover. As long and with the A1s. Now the A1s, what they call the sandy box, is a half-mile square that they try to keep everybody down, keep everybody out of it. So in this case, everybody was swarming, looking for the other survivor. He came to. He was hanging about 3 feet from the ground on one side of the tree. On the other side of the tree was about an 8 or 9 foot drop. He finally released his harness, and he falls to the ground. He can't move. And he gets a contact with the fast FAC. So now we had to put a SAR team together. One of the helicopters had been in the morning, had a maintenance problem. He finally got it fixed. I put together a second crew. I was going to be the backup or the high bird. So if anybody gets shot down or something, I can go in and try to get them. So now we get up there, and I drop off on top of a little mountain about 2.5 miles away. Jolly 73 was the low. He goes into a hover. Leo Thacker was the aircraft commander. Frank Mason, who lives down the road from me in Montana, is my ski partner. He was the co-pilot, young lieutenant. And now they get down there and they first try to lower the pararescueman, Chuck McGrath, down through the bamboo. He gets hung up upside down and he can't get out. So they have to pull him up and move him to another area. The tree where Lynn was under, when they tried to hover near it, they were breaking off big limbs. So they came down to a clearing. So they put him back on the ground, and Chuck fights his way up this 35-degree slope through the bamboo and gets Lynn. He hasn't got any choice but grab him by the harness and drag him down through the trees with all those broken and dislocated parts. He gets down underneath the helicopter. And meanwhile, everybody's closing in on the helicopter. The co-pilot tells me he's looking out the window and about 50 yards away, two guys are firing at him. The rounds are coming through the circuit breaker panel behind him and through the instrument panel, and they're bouncing off we had ceramic armored seats that would stop small arms, and they're bouncing off his seat. Now when we do that, we take our parachutes off, which we wore at altitude, and we sit way back on our seats so our hands are stretched completely out to give ourselves enough cover. And his hands are around the stick, and I'm flying the aircraft, the co-pilot. So if somebody hits me, he can grab that stick before we crash. And so I'm only looking out a very small window, the aircraft commander is. So they're in a hover. Now they're putting down the hoist. The hoist was damaged and it's stuck halfway down. It's about a 165-foot hover. So now Chuck is down there. He could hear ground fire in the ground. Of course, there's a lot of rotor wash and everything. And all of a sudden, here comes the hoist and everything piling up about 10 feet from him. And now he's got to pull off. I come in, I tell everybody I'm going in, meaning I'm going into the area. Everybody thought I got shot down. Anyway, I'm going in. And so he pulls off a Jolly 73, and I follow him for about 3 miles because he's got all these caution lights and warning lights because of the circuit breakers. And Leo said, "Hey, I've got power and I got control. See if you can go back." So now I got a decision. It's late in the afternoon. There's nobody else coming. There are no more Sandys. If I've got the other aircraft is badly damaged, if I follow him out. Now the other problem is if we get shot down, we haven't got anybody to recover us. But if we leave them there, they're both going to probably get killed. So I come back in, I get in the hover, I hover 90 degrees to what Leo 73 was flying. I can hear the minigunner going at 4,000 rounds a minute. I call him, I say, "What's going on back there?" Sergeant Noon says, 2 guys, 60 yards dead. Meanwhile, the microphone gets shot out from the hoister operator. So he's usually giving me directions like 1 forward, 2 left, back 1, whatever it was. He's not talking to me, so I think I'm hovering just like a rock. Now they're coming up the hoist. Jim Harding, who was Sandy 1, is strafing as close to the rotor blades as he can because he can see them on the ground. My co-pilot, Rufus Hutchinson, sees 2 guys up on the side of this hill about 80 yards away shooting at us from there. We finally get him up to the door. And just as we're coming up to the bottom of the helicopter and Chuck McGrath's head, they shoot 5 bullets to the side of the helicopter within a foot of his head. They get it up to the hoist. The pararescueman on the other side, Sergeant Reichley, comes across. They help him pull him in, and he gets shot in the knee, so he's down. The flight, we had a compact chromatographer on board, so he helps get is pulling them in, and this is they're doing that. They shoot Lynn Eichmann through the ankle and smash his ankle. So we get him in the helicopter. I say, what's going on back there? Sergeant Nunes turns and said, the survivor's coming in the door. I said, we're getting the hell out of here. So we come on out. I marry up with 7-3. He's in the lead now because I'm worried about him. But we had 450-gallon drop tanks, one on each side. They look like bombs. And so the North Vietnamese, or everybody shooting at you, they think these things are bombs and they shoot at them, which is good because we had foam in them to keep them from catching on fire or blowing up. Now he needs fuel. So now we're coming out and we've got 2 tankers that they race up into northern Laos to refuel us. So we're each on one of the tankers. And we're coming to this karst there. We have to go around this like a big ship. And about that time, we get a call from the Airborne Command and Control that monitors TMO, that monitors the MiG activity. And he says, we got a MiG that's leaving North Vietnam, heading towards you guys. And now we know we got a big problem. So we don't think much of it to start with until we get a call. He's 6 miles, 6 o'clock. And so now the helicopters, we peel off, elevator down. The two HC-130s are trying to accelerate. We had an F-4 that was on a tanker that he was the lead. He comes back. He's about 30 miles away. He says, I've got the MiG in sight, a commencing attack. Well, the North Vietnam, they monitored all of our radio calls. When they heard that, they broke the MiG off. And so now we come by this island of karst, they call it. At one time we had a TAC gun on it. Well, we did not know there was an anti-aircraft gun on it, but because we were so low, they couldn't depress on it. Otherwise, there'd been a duck shoot for them. So we get back to NKP with Len, and he was 18 months in the hospital with about 6 major operations. And so that was pretty satisfaction to get him back. Okay, we're running out of time. I got one SAR I'm going to tell you right here that's not in the books. Okay, in 1965, we were over there. We had 2 cargo did I tell this already?
No.
2 cargo H3s that were over there. They didn't have good fuel, so they put a fiberglass fuel tank in the cargo compartment. Well, they had 2 helicopters. One was for square parts because they didn't have good parts there. And so the other one would fly. So they had a F-105 shot down, and a A-1E went to try to find him. It got shot down. So this H-3 launches, and they're going into the SAR area, and they get shot, and the fuel tank in the back of the helicopter catches on fire. The PJ quickly bails out. The aircraft commander calls bailout. The only time I know this has ever happened, they jettisoned both windows, climbed up on their seat, and dove out the window. Now the flight engineer has a gunner's belt on, so if he falls out of the airplane, he bails out, but he didn't undo his gunner's belt, and he's under the aircraft spinning in a circle, and nobody's in the aircraft, including him. He finally gets his gunner's belt loose, and the aircraft is heading right for the side of a mountain, and drops down the ground, pops his chute, gets a couple of swings, and he's on the ground. A little later that evening, a Navy S-3, which they use for rescue, Big Mother, comes into the area. These guys didn't have flares. The radios didn't work. The engineer has a Zippo lighter. He lights it, and they can see that, and they pick him up. So now back at NKP, you've got 4 Jolly Green crew members. 3 of them are on the ground, the 2 pilots and the PJ. And so they're going to launch next day, but the Canbird has 15 red X's, which means you can't fly it until they're fixed. hold on. I'll take his name in a second. So the aircraft commander, the other aircraft commander goes down there. He says, I'm going to fly this airplane. His flight engineer won't do it.
Barry Camper.
Barry Camut, okay. He's one of these are the first 8 Jolly Greens in the theater, pilots. And so he goes down there and the flight engineer won't fly it. And he says, goes into maintenance. He said, I need some help here. And the maintenance guy says, hey, I'm not qualified, but I've flown in an H3. I'll sign him off. So he signed off the 15 red X's. One of them was needing an engine change because the engine was smoking. There were no radios in it. About half the instruments in the instrument panel are gone, and no navigation equipment. So he takes off and spends 3 days flying into North Vietnam, looking for the guys that are on the ground. He found that one of the Navy S3s got shot down, and he picked up 2 guys off that crew. At the end of 3 days, they called off the SAR. Now, there's no records of this because everything they did at that time was classified. Nobody was supposed to be there. Nobody got any awards or decorations for any of this. So it's the untold SAR that needs to be in history. So how am I doing for time?
You've got 11 minutes.
Okay. Let me see.
Actually, 4.
Okay. 4 minutes.
If they want questions.
Okay. If they want to ask questions, we got 4 minutes here. I had one other kind of interesting SAR. We decided we had a night recovery system we were going to try to make. And so Ben Arell and I and Jerry Shipman and other guys that had handpicked crews to try to do this. We're up one morning, both of us were instructor pilots, about 6 o'clock. We're up flying. They tell us to land. We come back to NKP. They said they've got a F4 up by Kep Airfield by not too far from Haiphong Harbor that went down to 803, and I think we can get him. So we decide to do this at night. So now we're up all day. We fly over to Da Nang, and we do put our plan together so we could take off about midnight and fly up there. Well, we get in the clouds on the way up. And Ben, we have to do a instrument separation, and his altitude hold went off because we were on altitude hold, this flying formation. He went down and pancaked off the water at about 150 knots. And when he pulled up, he made a turn and he was flying towards a place called Hainan Island, owned by the Chinese. Now we're flying straight ahead, and this HC-130 is only supposed to go part way up there, and we have to talk to the other helicopter. And I get on the with me, and he keeps flying north. Finally, we had to go into a turn, and the next thing we know, here comes the other helicopter catching up. He thinks we're going away from us, and we're not. We're in halfway through a turn, and he comes underneath me about 20 feet, goes right underneath us about 150 knots. I fell off the hose. We finally get around, and now we go up there. We don't know where we are. We're not navigating. We ask a Navy ship, give us vectors. They give us vectors to a holding point. We get there. What we didn't know that the survivor had been captured. We could see him firing at a FASFAC, one of the ALFACs, F-Force that was flying up there. And our plan was to go all the way up to the Chinese buffer zone, which was a no-fly zone, because we knew there wouldn't be any bad guys in there. We'd go in there and then come back 55 miles at night. The moon went down. If we'd have tried it, we'd probably both crashed. Now, coming back, all this excitement's finally boiling off of us. We're on short file to Da Nang, and all of a sudden, my head, I had my face mask off, hits the stick because I fell asleep. The flight engineers asleep, the co-pilots asleep, everybody in the airplane's asleep, and we're about 5 500 feet off the water. Nobody would have known what happened. So that was a 9 life I got away with. But if folks would like to, ask some questions, I've got several other SARs I flew on where I was a high bird, and they were really tough SARs. What do we think?
Sure, we got Daryl Whitcomb, who's asked to make some comments, if he could,
Oh.
please.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could, I'd just like to make a couple historical observations here. That year, 1972, there were 7 Air Force Crosses awarded to rescue troops for their missions. And that covered 5 different missions. And I'd like to point out that Dale flew on all 5 of those missions, interestingly enough. Secondly, Dale talked about the Valiant 04 Alpha Rescue, and I would like to point out to the group that because of his actions on that mission, he has been now nominated for Medal of Honor.
Fabulous.
Now, I'd like to say one thing. If you're interested in those rescues, and I think there was 147 fixed wing shot down, Daryl has written a book called Moral Imperative,
Yeah, okay.
1972, that covers all of the shoot downs.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Okay.
1st of January to the 31st of December, who picked them up, where they're killed, captured, lost, and Army, Air Force, Navy, or Air America, whoever got them. It's a great book if you're interested in it. What else we got?
Can't hear you, Steve.
Don't have any other questions that have come in just yet.
Okay. Well, I'll BS until you get a question. How's that sound? So we had another, Ben Arell, who was a great pilot. We had another mission called Bingo 505 in the most heavily defended area in South Vietnam. We tried to get him for 3 days. At that time, the North Vietnamese had 100,000 troops clear down south. They were about to overrun an air base called An Loc. We had 25 US Marines and 2,500 South Vietnamese Marines. They had tanks. So we couldn't get any fighters to help us. We could get 4. So for 3 days, we're trying to get in there, and it was so heavily defended. On the second day, Ben and I were on alert, and I was the lead for the first day and a half, and he was the second day and a half. Said, Coral Sea called up, why aren't you getting him? We can't get any air support. Are you going to try tomorrow? Yes, we're going to try tomorrow. The next morning, they showed up with 76 Navy fighters, all the aircraft from 2 carriers, and a guy named Fack picked those guys up. Dan Gibson facked in 76 fighters. And they used, for example, they had 12 A-7s with bombs on them. And he had them go parallel to each other a little over a quarter mile apart and dropped their bombs across this valley. And the A-1s and helicopters flew down in between all the smoke and everything from the bombs. They got the other side. Ben gets into a hover. They're up over a trench. The guy shoots the PJ in the knee. They finally get the pilot on board, who was a Navy or Marine A-6 intruder pilot that we had dropped oral area denial ordinance on him. We got him out. I am about 15 miles back, holding a real high, about 16,000 feet. I get a 3-ring strobe, which tells me I'm getting painted by an SA-2 missile. And now I think this is all over. F-105 Wild Weasel fired an anti-radiation missile at him, a Standard Arm, and knocked out the radar. So now we're breathing a little better. About 10 minutes later, we get a second strobe, and an Army A-7 guy killed that one. So now we're having all the fun we can possibly stand. So now we're coming back. I'm behind everybody. I'm in really high altitude. You can only go about 70 knots. and I'm trying to catch up with them. I can see NKP from where I am, but between me and NKP is the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We got a little hypoxia here. I decided to take a right turn and go right to NKP. Bad choice. We get over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, 357 millimeters open up on me. I'm getting ground fire 5 o'clock, ground fire 7 o'clock. They didn't believe that we were that high, and they had a fuse too low. Now I am screaming for some A1s, and one of them turns around, comes back about 3 or 4 miles west. He puts his nose up in the air, fires the Willie Peep marking rocket, came right down and landed between the 3 guns, and they all quit firing. Well, finally, I caught up with everybody. And on the way back, we had to fly under the clouds up the Mekong River. We had two ships of helicopters. I was lead. And we came out the other end. The other 2 helicopters had passed us, and we didn't even see them. That was because it was raining that hard. So that was an exciting SAR for me. Some of those SARs, we would write letters home and give them to the ops clerk and say, hey, if I don't come back, mail these. And that was one of them. Mm-hmm. But getting those guys back and realizing you had a lifelong impact on them was nearly narcotic in the effect. And with the A1 guys, my heroes, protecting us, the OV-10s, bringing in all those fighters coming in there and bombing, and the HC-130s, it was a great team,
Hey,
How we
sir,
doing, Coach?
Sure.
Yeah,
we have another one come in.
Oh, we're
From,
stepping at each other. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Are you Danny?
No,
I'm
I'm asking, your first name is Dale, and my
Yes.
father's name was Dale, and he was also in Vietnam, same time you were doing, he was on the King.
oh, great.
Very curious if there's any chance you knew my father.
What was his last name?
Condi.
No, I didn't know a lot of those guys, and we had 3 occasions. They went way past their clearance limit to get us fuel. And I had all 3 occasions. They really made a difference in that SAR effort and my outcome. I love those guys.
Oh, no. Well, thank you. So, given the same first name, I thought there might have been a
Yeah.
chance, because you
Yeah.
probably met in the O Club in Thailand somewhere.
Well, they were at a different base. See,
Okay.
So we were at NKP. We were slow movers at NKP. We had A1s, QU-22Bs, C-119 gunships.
Yeah.
We had 2 squadrons. We had a special ops squadron, H-53s. We had Pedros there. So it was all slow movers, and we had there at that field.
Well, I can tell you, he brought home some of the mission tapes and let me listen to the actual mission tapes from some of your missions. And you quite likely are on there, because he's, like you, has like 6 stars on his Vietnam, service medal, because search and rescue, they managed to get you back there every time they could.
Yeah. Well, we lost several H-53s. We lost my roommate, and later on, after the war was over, my co-pilot, my last co-pilot, was down in Cambodia, and his helicopter went down there, and the 2 PJs were able to bail out. Now, sadly, 5 years later, we found out what really happened to him. There was a bolt that hadn't been tempered that was in the hydraulic system, the controls, the flight controls.
I heard about that from him.
And so we lost at least 4 helicopters from that. Wow.
Wow, thank you for that.
You bet.
Sure, we have one more question that's come in.
Yeah.
This is from D. Piper. When did you do the split S on your CH-53?
Well, that was on the first day of Oyster 01 Bravo. And so, we were up there, and we didn't have any MiG cap, and we got that call. That's when I flipped it upside down and found out I was a little too low, and we went into the hyperdrive. But if I'd been at 1,500 feet, nope, it'd been easy to do. Later on, we leased H-53 helicopters to Sikorsky, They took him to the Farnborough Air Show and demoed that.
Well, we're closing in on the end of the session. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Steve, Bill Stramber. Just wanted to ask the general what he thinks of today's equipment in terms of the V-22, the HH-60, but especially the Osprey in terms of the deep SARS programs like he was flying. Do you think that's a real improvement? Is that something you'd want to get your hands on?
Well, the rescue and special ops are separate, and I was the wing commander of the first special ops wing. And what happened on the second attempt, remember the Desert One failure when we were trying to go after the embassy in Tehran?
Yes.
The first one was a failure, and there was lots of reason for that. And they formed the Joint Special Ops Command, which only reports to the Secretary of Defense. No service involvement, no theater commander involvement.
And your own acquisition.
And we had our own acquisition. But we got, because of that, all of the HH-53s were transferred from rescue to Hurlburt at that time. Jerry Shipman was the squadron commander down at Kirtland at the time, and he gave them all the best helicopters and all of his instructors, all of his best pilots, and they all went there. So now what you have left is H3s in combat rescue. And so what happens is the V-22, I was on the Camel committee and the Pentagon decided what it was going to do. Anyway, so it's a terrific aircraft because it's got the speed and range, okay? But it's special ops. And during Desert Storm, they were the ones that went out there to try to make the rescues. And but still, it was so damn. The H-53s, it was super hostile. The V-22 has that ranging capability. You got to do it at night, and you have to know the threat. The rescue the MH-60s have a lot of ECM jamming, chaff, flares. They've got these great MVGs, GPS, and they can navigate and do that. There's a new one coming on called the W model. It's got bigger engines, got more power. It's got different configurations. So actually, you can put the 50 cal machine guns forward and fire forward in the helicopters as well as sideways. Mm-hmm. However, we're not, the war is over and we're not getting the funding in combat rescue. They're going to decrease the number of aircraft in it. There's a new aircraft out there. It is very interesting. It's like the V-22, except the rotor blades actually fold back over the engine, and now it's jet powered. So you have two jet engines. It's supposed to have 400 knots speed and way more range. And the issue is it's got a lot of capability, but it's so expensive to develop. You've got to get either the Marine Corps in it or the Navy or somebody else to help the funding. Right now, it's too expensive for the Air Force. But right now, the rescue guys are getting a little atrophied. They're still great guys. They rescued 20 to, my son-in-law, Jolly Green, was a deputy wing commander at Davis Monthan. He went to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Djibouti 8 times, 8 tours. Probably saved, when they got these guys back in that golden hour with the pararescue guys in the back, probably about 40 guys that they saved their lives. And save is, you save a sight, a limb, or their life. If those 3 things are considered a save. And they would get them back there. That's why we have people coming back with no legs, all shot to hell. And we get them back in that golden hour. And they get in that aircraft, those PJs are doing tracheotomies, cut downs, all that kind of stuff in the back of the helicopter. And the trauma units back in there were getting to, we're taking care of them.
Thanks, sir.
What else we got?
Any other questions out there?
Nobody's throwing up the BS flag on me?
Hey, Dale, this is Buck Buchanan. Can you hear me?
Oh, Buck. He's
Uh,
he was Sandy too on the oyster mission.
I was thinking about that Nail 31 Alpha Bravo SAR,
Yeah.
where the was a 2-day SAR that actually Ron Smith was the Sandy Low pickup.
You're a little far from the mic.
Speak up.
Okay, I don't know how to turn the. I'm not.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
better.
Okay. Mike Foss got shot down on the first day, got picked up by Air America.
Whoop, you're breaking up.
And then Major Milner, the next Sandy Low, he got shot up. And can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, it was a 2-day SAR. Roger Lackey and I were the second to last Sandys on day one. Randy Jane tried and Colonel Robinson tried to make a pickup. They were just a smoke flight on day one. We couldn't get them out. Both the front seater and the back seater survived the night. When Lackey and I went down on the first lighter the next day, and the weather was Delta Sierra, he left me up above, went down through the soup himself, and I could hear the Alpha and Bravo both telling him that he was getting shot at. But Alpha said, "I'm the proud owner of an AK-47." And so that made us feel pretty good. So I said, "Okay, Lack, can I come down?" He said, "Yeah, go ahead." And so I said, "So where do I break out?" He said, "About 1,000 feet." So I went down, spiraled down, and as luck would have it, I got down almost on top of him. And I could see and the survivors were calling ground fire to him, and I could see where they were coming from. So between the two of us, we trolled around there, Lackey low, me up a little higher, and killed guns for about 2 hours. We also had, since they were nails on the ground, we had nail facts that we're putting in fast movers, and it was on the thumb of the river, which was a major crossing point for the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And there were a lot of guns around, big guns, and the nails were putting in fast movers on the big guns. Long story short, we finally bingoed out. And Ron Smith, he was the last Sandy on scene. He and Ron Smith and Randy Scott were the Sandys on that. They came down. Of course, Smith, as you know from Dale's talk about him on Oyster, had his stuff together. And he had thought about this, knew where the survivor was. There was a 37 site in a cave high to the north end, kind of around the thumb in the river, that really had a bearing on the helicopters and so on. And that's what happened to Randy Jane on his run in the day before, or the evening before, and it was the helicopters problem, and it wasn't a Jolly driver. It was a wing weenie, I think, that was in the helicopter, and Randy told him to stay on the deck, and he didn't, and he got up high enough so the 37 could bear down on him, and they were unable to make the pickup. Well, I regress, but on the second day, Randy came down, and he had a plan of smoking off that 37 in the high ground in the cave above the survivors, and did that, and called in the Jollies right on the deck. I don't know who the Jollies were. Dale.
That was Ken Ernest. Ken Ernest,
Okay.
the best. He was the best Jolly Green there until he PCS a little bit later.
Okay, okay. Well, you know that it was a really, it was a tough SAR. We had, like I said, the first Sandy Lowe bailed out Mike Foth. That was his second shoot down, by the way. And then we had two others that were shot up, A1s that were shot up pretty bad. Lackey and I were real lucky that we both took hits, but nothing that was made us actually. Lackey took a bad enough hit, so he went up above the overcast, and I looked him over, but he was okay. So anyway, we got those two survivors, 3-1 Alpha and Bravo out. Kind of the sad story about it is that Lackey was a redneck from New Mexico, and he went back to the New Mexico Guard in an A-37, and he really liked to photograph. Anyway, he was doing a join up or filming I think he was doing the join up on another A7 and tried to join up through the camera, had a mid-air collision and was killed. So
I remember that.
Okay.
I definitely remember that.
So
you know,
that's all.
That SAR, that was an Air Force cross SAR, as you well know. And of course,
Lackey did get the
you were
SAR.
number 2 on the Oyster Zero, the Oyster 01 SAR. And so on that second day, you were with Ron's wing, flying around there in the middle of the Red River Valley, just getting the shit shot at you.
Of course, I didn't realize that you and Ron had such a good plan in your heads, but on the way up, I remember King telling us that the fast fac had aborted. And I, to me, even now, it was a head shaker because I just couldn't believe that a fast fac from the triple nickel that was supposed to pinpoint Roger's position had aborted. And I'm thinking, and Ron on Fox Mike, he's saying, telling us all as well, the 4 Sandys and the Jollies, that we had no fast fac. And I'm thinking, oh shit, now we're going to have to go find him rather than just go to a set of coordinates. But as the SAR progressed, I realized how well Dale and Ron had it sorted out in their minds, and we did get shot at when Roger was when we were looking for Roger again. If we got time, I got another authenticator, and I will say that I think Dale was a little nervous, even on the second day, about Ron or about Locker being under duress. So someone had called the Triple Nick there and got a little more info on Locker and another authenticator. And the question was, what is kites? And if you went to K-State, which of course I didn't, but it was a beer joint right outside of K-State there. So once Ron made a radio contact with him, that was before we got shot at. He said, "Okay, Roger, or okay, Oyster, we've got another authenticator." And he comes back with a kind of a ho hum. Okay, go ahead. So Ron says, "What is kites?" And of course, the radios were not too great. And he came back, he says, "It's a beer joint." And Ron Smith didn't understand. He says, "Say again." He says, "It's a place to drink beer." And Ron says, "Sounds like you're the guy we're looking for." And he said, "You damn right I am."
I know you.
Yeah, I remember that.
Hey, sir, we're going to go bingo here at 1:05.
Okay.
So we only got a couple of minutes left.
Okay, I'm done anyway. Thank you.
Great stories, and we appreciate this very much. And the General, has been nice meeting you. I wanted to give a couple of minutes here for General Holmes to have closing remarks, because at 1:05, I think these computers are going to go out. General, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. It's hard to think of much to say. Sir, we thank you so much for your time tonight and for your stories, for taking the trouble to figure out how to log in with us, and for everybody else who joined us tonight to hear these stories. They're stories I had read about. They're stories I hadn't heard firsthand, but the courage, the commitment to the mission, the commitment to each other shines through in everything you say, sir, loud and clear. And I'm amazed that you remember all the detail and everything that you remember from all those times. You had a couple of guys helping you, but you sure spelled it all out for us. So thank you so much for
You don't
spending
get-
time with us. And I'll just see if you have any final comment for us.
Yeah, you don't forget getting shot at. You know, it's one of those things that's it's in your hard drive. But anyway, you know, first of all, that was our mission. Everybody had a mission over there, and the combat rescue mission and the combat rescue team, you know, we were special because we were really motivated because we realized it could be us on the ground and getting back to your family. And at that time, we had no idea when the war was going to end. We didn't know it was going to be, a year later in March, the guys would be coming back from Hanoi. So that was the scariest heck. I looked like Pancho Villa. I had my 38 revolver with 50 rounds. I had a Walther PPK 22 in a holster under one armpit, and 200 rounds of 22 high vel in the other. I had a bandolier slung over my feet with 400 rounds, and I had an AR-15 slung over my feet. The stupid thing about this is I thought I'd get on the ground and shoot it out. There wasn't one single POW that said it was better to die than be a POW. And that was a lesson I did not know then, and it would have been stupid to shoot it out.
Well, thanks again for your wisdom and your courage on those days, and for all your leadership all the years since. And it's great to have a chance to spend some time with you. Steve?
Right.
Thanks very much, everybody, for this tonight. We'll look forward to the next event in November with Chief Fisk. And so thanks very much for joining, and look forward to you joining again.
That's what I thought.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey, Jerry.
How's it going, Dale? By the way, those are my H-53s that you stole for special ops.
I know. That's what I said. You gave him the best you had and the crews.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
You have to see what your,
Let me sit here for a while until we get signed off.
hold on a second. This is what you just got in your.
I think the computer is probably going to keep running. The person who set this up has left it running, but if you want to keep talking, you can. We usually end about